Good morning, everybody. This is Walk the Dog with Riot Mort. It is July 2nd, which is Wednesday, at about 6:30 a.m. And hopefully everyone's having a great week as we reach the midpoint of the week. I finally got to play my first game of Final Fantasy Commander yesterday. And at least with the group I was playing with, we only had 3 people, so it wasn't like the right version, but I definitely misjudged the tempo of how Commander works compared to a normal game. Because it's just like, I'm just playing some normal creatures, and all of a sudden, people are milling their entire deck and casting it all, and very combo oriented. It's like, okay. Today I learned, so a lot to learn there. But interesting nonetheless. I did manage to gain 10,000 health at one point, though, with a jumbo cactar with lifelink, so that was neat. So, yeah. Okay, more importantly, though, I'm sure a lot of you are wondering about Sephiroth, the cat. Interestingly enough, the place I was playing Magic was literally right by the vet's office, so I went in and was like, hey, did you get our test results? And the answer is complicated. It's definitely not what we were hoping for in the terms of it wasn't negative. But according to our vet, he was expecting either a negative or a positive. And unfortunately, there's a third option that he didn't know about that was actually what happened, which is, he either called it regressive positive or regressive negative. But the point is, it's regressive. And what that means is still has the disease and could end up being contagious someday, but isn't yet, which is very weird. So it's not a death sentence to Sephiroth, but we also can't merge the cats, which is weird. So the vet was saying, we can retest in a month or two, and we still can't put the cats together. And the thing that we should do is we should probably find a new home for Sephiroth. But my wife's freaking out a little bit, saying, the cat's got attached to Leo. The cat's really attached. We shouldn't get rid of it. We're not gonna be able to find it a home. We should just keep it. I'm like, we can't just have our garage be a cat haven and leave him out there by himself for the next 2 months or longer. And I'm not going to bore you with all the details, but TLDR here is my wife's like, no, we have to keep him. And I'm like, what do you want me to do? So what my wife and daughter have agreed to do, unless we were to magically find someone who wants this cat, which I don't think we will, which is a shame, because even the vet was like, he's such a good cat. He's so well behaved and so lovey. I'd take that cat if he could. My wife already ordered it. We're going to convert Leota's room, she wants to do this, into essentially a, home for him. Leota will still be in there. Really, a car this early? Hi, buddy. Into a room for him. So basically, Leota's bedroom. The only cat that will be allowed in there is Sephiroth. She wants to have, his litter box and everything in there, and she'll clean it and everything, which she will. She's good about that. And then we ordered this big, glass cat play area thingy, so that when Leota has to leave, she can put him in that and keep him in there, keep him safe. And that way, even if, something happens and the door gets open, the other cats won't merge together. So, I don't know. We're going to try to make it work, which is silly and stupid and privileged, but he's a good cat, so whatever. It is what it is. We'll see what happens in the test in 2 months, but, what it means is this cat could live, regressive, they can live up to, 10 years with this thing, so it's not like he's sick. It's just a pain in the butt. It's a pain in the butt that now we have 5 cats, 4 of which can't be in contact with the 5th. Yay! So whatever. The things I do for my family sometimes. But, I mean, at least it's good news that we don't have to put him down. Um, and it's really cute, by the way. Leota went out there last night and spent some time with him and sent us some videos. And he's very lovey. He's very like, come here, human. Sit in your chair. I would like to cuddle you now. I would like to make biscuits in your lap. It's adorable. So, I don't know. I mean, sometime in the next couple weeks, I'll have to build this thing when it arrives. I love putting together furniture. Yay. It's fine. So, but yeah, he's a cute little cat. So there you go. Like I said, not quite the news we were hoping for, but overall, I'd call it positive, I guess. And who knows, maybe in a month or two. I'm skeptical, though. I feel like what's going to happen is this, like, every time we test this cat, it'll just be like, yep, it's still regressive. You still can't merge the cats. Okay, great. Yay. So, anyway, there you go. There's your Sephiroth update. All right, questions. Set 14, we did this thing where the forecasts all had overlap with items, right? Like your Ginsu's users were Aphelios and Zeri, your blue buff users were Annie and Vex, etc., etc. This resulted in us having a lot of backline units. And how did that all work out, in my opinion? So, the answer is mixed. I think what it did was it just moved the goalpost a little bit and didn't actually solve any of our problems. It used to be like in set 12 and set 13, it's like if you built a Ginsu's on 2-1, you felt like you could only play this champion. Okay, so we took a stab at this, and now it's like, well, if you build Ginsu's, there's 2 champs. But really all that did was go, okay, sure, I can play either one, but really, how many Vanguards did I hit? Guess I'm playing Aphelios. Or how much Exotech did I hit? Guess I'm playing Zeri. Right? Like, there were only certain compositions. And it's not like Vanguards weren't flex, right? Like, Aphelios, for example, could be played in Golden Ox. That was a fine comp. It could be played in 4 Vanguard 4 Marksman, 6 Vanguard 2 Marksman. But other than that, you weren't flexing. And it's so interesting because I think when everyone talks about flex or they have these memories of flex and things like that, they always think back to like set 4 where you had Ashe, the Hunter Ashe, who could be played in basically anything. And I look back at that and I was researching that a little bit and thinking about it. And it's like, the only reason that was true is because the Hunter trait beyond 2 was incredibly underpowered to the point where it usually wasn't worth it. And having more Hunters wasn't very good. Elderwood was not a good trait on her. And 6 Elderwood was a bad trait for the most part. And so it's like, the way you make flex true is make traits bad. But it's kind of true, right? Like, say for the sake of exploration, we actually deleted every trait beyond 2-piece. Almost like a bronze for life thing going on, right? The game does get more flex when that becomes true. Because you don't have to, if you're playing a Zeri, you get to balance her peak around being 2 rapid fire or 3 Exotech or whatever. And then there's decisions around what supporting units and what supporting things around it you build. So, I don't know, it's this interesting double-edged sword that as we've gotten better at balancing traits are now worthwhile and useful, but upon using them, it's, comps become a little one-directional. Now, this is only true at the highest level of play, by the way. For most of our players, 7 Exotech being playable and intuitive, good thing. It's a very good thing. But, like I said, how many different ways can you really play Zeri? 1. Vex and Annie ended up pretty similar. Annie is really only played in Amp, a little bit in Golden Ox, but not really. I don't think you actually can play Golden Ox Annie that well, unless you like high roll. But Vex ended up being this really weird champ that was like only playable in Vexotech and nothing else. There's no 5 Executioner Vex, and there's not really a 7 Divinicore Vex. So there's probably some deeper studies to do about like our understanding of the trait web and their power structure. We have a balanced framework in place, but it seems like there's more than that. So a really dumb example is, as a starting point, whatever level the trait is, so 2, 3, 4, 5, multiply that by 10%. So a 5-piece trait should give you plus 50% output. And then from there, we usually end up creeping it up a little bit, but it's a good starting point. An example of where we've creeped it up, by the way, all I used to do is look at 5 Cypher. 5 Cypher is 70% AD and AP, so 70% output. That's insane. 5 Cypher ended up too strong. But generally that's kind of our framework, but it feels like that framework is only getting us so far. And in actuality, what we need to do is a little bit more analysis of like how, not just the percent output, but how much the primary carries benefit from that percent output, and in what way relative to the cost of the units, which is really, really complicated and not many people on our team are going to know about or be able to think through. So applying that type of complicated thought pattern to more people on the team probably isn't realistic. So not really sure what to do there. But that's realistically probably where we're headed, is some sort of breakdown of the framework applied to the cost structure, applied to the difficulty to play. But that's why TFT is such a fascinating game. If you really care about it deeply, stuff like that is a really interesting conversation. And comparing something like Exotech to Fairy to KDA to whatever, and like seeing why the trait structure works, why the output is relative to each other, studying the different outputs of a vertical, why they become necessary or unnecessary, things like that. Pretty interesting stuff. And that's not even to talk about like the classes with like rapid fire and how much we had to bribe rapid fire to actually be playable. 6 rapid fire, what is it, like 23% attack speed per attack? Total output's like 220%. I just said the framework for a 6-piece is 60%, and it gets up to 220. Now, granted, it's because it's ramping, and you have to do weird things with ramping, because ramping technically starts at 0, and a trait that starts at 0 power isn't very good. But yeah, so anyway, TLDR here is, I think the experiment was worth doing, but it wasn't like a raging success that made the game way better. It just helped us kind of understand that the way champions interact with their traits right now is extremely tied, not just their items, and you can't solve one without doing both. So that's kind of my take on it. That being said, I do think having a lot of backline was good. Melee units in general are just really hard to make work right now, though Zed ended up really good. I am so happy with where Zed ended up this set. He feels like one of the healthiest, coolest assassins we've ever made at his current power level, where it's like he doesn't instant kill your backline, but he's still a threat to your backline, and he can pull off some clutch finishes. I think Zed might actually be my favorite unit of the set, at least where he ended up, because like 5 Cypher Zed right now is very fun to watch. So there you go. All right, next question. This is a good one. Portals. So we've had, opening encounters, not portals, opening encounters since set 11. Set 11 now, basically. And, we rotate them to some extent, but to another extent, we kind of have the same ones, right? Scuttle Puddle's been around for a while. I mean, a lot of these have been around since set 9, right? But we have your Scuttle Puddle, your Triple Gold, your Gold Opener, your Prismatic Opener, etc., etc. And the question was sort of like, hey, these are getting kind of repetitive. What's the need to rotate them? And this is actually one of those places where, like, we're at risk of not innovating. Because if you actually go back and look at set 11 through 14, I think every opening encounter we've added that isn't one of our staples is, like, at best, okay. At worst, terrible. Right? Like, some of the set specific ones that have gone were just bad, right? Glares at Warwick opener in 13. Which is why they often get rotated out. And what that's left us with is a pretty light selection. And what I will say here, and this is one where I don't agree with the challenger players, they still complain about literally more than half of them, right? How many Soju rants have you seen where he's just like, I was in a tournament and of my 6 games, 5 of them were these inflationary encounters. And it's like he's counting Prismatic Opener as an inflationary. And it's like, what do you want, man? For whatever reason, there are challenger players out there that would prefer every game be a gold only game, which we can't do. I think at one point someone was complaining about Vi being inflationary. And I was like, okay, we've come too far. But I think that's kind of the challenge, right? Is that there are people who are going to want variety in our opening encounters, but that variety has to come in terms of non-inflationary outputs, but also has to come in terms of non-game warping outputs, right? Because anytime we learned this in set 12 or 11, anytime the opening encounter alters the game rules, people are also not happy, right? And so there's come a point where I don't know that there's a lot of design space left for what we can do with opening encounters. I think at one point set 14 was experimenting with a opening encounter that put Chosen back in the game. And I think I immediately shut that one down because, again, it's sort of like, hey, A, it makes Chosen less special when we bring it back, and B, also the people who, like, it changes the game rules too much, right? Like, imagine playing set 14 and 1 in every 30 games is a game with Chosen. I don't think that's a good idea, So, on the one hand, I agree with you that it would be nice to get some innovation in this space. On the other hand, I'm not sure what there is. This is one space where I feel like we might be out of design space, right? Because we've dabbled in this space a lot, right? If you go all the way back to Galaxies, Galaxies delved into a lot of this, and if you go back and look at all the old Galaxies, right? This is stuff like the opener is a 4-cost, which hilarious for Pengu's Party and Chonk's Treasure, not so much for a competitive game. Or the one that said, lose the back row, you only have 3 rows. That was one we did in Galaxies, and it was like, oh, okay, so any comp with AoE spells is now just instantly better. Like, not really, And then beyond that, the ones that were liked in Galaxies were, guess what? Extremely inflationary. Shocking, I know. So, yeah. So I guess here, TLDR is, agree with you, it would be nice to get a rotation going. Scared that we don't actually have that much design space here. To the point where, I don't know, maybe this is one of those spaces where it's just like, we have to do something completely different or get rid of it, right? Like, I feel like this would make the game worse for a lot of our like engaged casuals, but is there a world where it's just opening encounters are gone so that we can put that space, again, we always talk about complexity budget, where it's like we can put that somewhere else, you know? But who knows? That's a longer term problem. But yeah, TLDR here. I get it. I get the pain. All right. This next one's interesting. The person asked, do you think there is room for quests as a mechanic in TFT? And the quests example, they're like, some of those quest augments you have are pretty cool, but what about an entire mechanic that was like, gave you quests to do in game? And the examples I think they listed were like, get 4 3-stars and something happens, or spend 250 gold, or like quests. The short answer is no. I don't think there is. I think the quest augments we have are probably the best interpretation of this. Or if you told me there was like a trait that did some of this, maybe. But here's the challenge. When you have one clear goal, right? Let's say your clear goal here is to win the game, right? To deal damage to other players, build the strongest board, and win the game. That's your clear goal. And everything you do is in relation to that goal, right? So every choice you make gets you closer to that goal, right? Choosing to upgrade units, or to loss streak, or to which augment you make, all of that is in spirit of the same goal. Now, let's say you throw on quests in there. All of a sudden, you have conflating goals, right? So let's say, for example, you took Exalted Adventure, right? And then your next augment pick is a combat augment or heroic grab bag, right? All of a sudden, you have to make a decision where the combat augment is likely more power, but riskier because you might not hit, or the heroic grab bag kind of reduces that risk, but you'll have a lower cap. Makes sense. But both of those are still in spirit of completing the quest, which is in relation to completing the goal of beating somebody else. But if there's a secondary goal, and that secondary goal is, hey, I need to complete this quest more than I need to beat my opponents, all of a sudden that decision making becomes very, very gray. And so I don't think that's a good idea, because then it becomes unclear what's the right decision, unless you perfectly, which I don't think is possible, but if you perfectly allocate the difference in outputs between winning the game and completing your quest. But even then, I think the other thing it does is it's like, hey, I'm sitting here building the strongest board, trying to do my best, and then someone completes their quest, and now I lose? That's weird. They chose a different path. Did I choose the wrong path? Like, the message becomes extremely muddy what you're supposed to do in the game. Now, hilariously enough, we actually have an example of this in the game right now. Cash out traits. Cash out traits are essentially a quest in and of itself, right? If you look at Cypher is basically ignore the rest of the game state, kind of do my own thing, and then when I feel like it, I say my quest is done, and I'm rewarded outputs. And the problem is, I think if we actually were to make a quest system mechanic, it would just kind of turn into that. It would be like, do as much as you can, then here's your reward, and I hope you beat somebody. I don't think that's very interesting gameplay. I think having especially if like everyone was doing it in the same lobby, and then it just turns like, well, I was trying to complete my quest, and I got this quest, and I got the bad quest, and I was, like, I don't think that's really worth it. So a quest system as a mechanic for a set, I think really does not sound very good for the game. Now, commonly when people ask this question, what they're actually asking for is goals. And I think goals or achievements I think are a great thing for TFT. I personally, again, if I could snap my fingers and make this true, because the utility cost of implementing such a system is questionable, but I was somebody who really loved these in World of Warcraft. I wish every set came with a list of like 30 goals, and if you completed those goals, you got some unique cosmetic that would help you remember your time. Hell, even if it was just an emote, it'd be cool if it wasn't an emote, but that helped you remember your time and the thing you did, right? I think, one of the coolest things in World of Warcraft was like having my mount from completing some of those raids with nobody dying and having the undying mounts and stuff like that, or titles or whatever, right? Like, that was cool. Having rewards for exclusive things that you did that were opt-in, that's a very fun system. A little less fun in a PvP game. And that's, I think, one of the challenges is it's like, you make a quest where it's win a game with Zyra carry. Dumb example. But it's like, well, what's the most efficient way to complete this quest? Hop into a normal game with 6 friends and have them let you do it, right? Which is like, removes kind of the fun from it. So, but I do like that kind of system, and I wish we had something that kept track of like, I think that, hilariously enough, you know what the closest version of this is? Shout out to tactics.tools end of set thing, where they tell you about your set and how many champs you won with and how many traits you won with and how many prismatic traits you hit and stuff like that. Like, that is such a cool experience. Take that, match it into outputs. It's like, you completed this, good job, here's your reward. Like, that's an engaging loop right there. That's an engaging, fun loop for people who like that stuff. But even that right there, that's an audience thing, right? Like, I, as a player, love that kind of stuff. But you're like Soju's and Robin songs as players, wouldn't give 2 shits. They'd just be like, nope, don't care. It's not for me. And it was the same thing with WoW achievements, right? Like, there were people who loved them and other people who wouldn't even look at them. My buddy Jeevan, who was like a hardcore arena player at the time, he couldn't care too less about his achievements. And in fact, raiding to him was just an output to get better gear to be better in arena, because he was just a competitive gamer. That's how it works. So, yeah, there you go. All right, I don't know if I can get through this last question. Oh, yeah, I can't get through this last question. This last question was, how do you deal with negativity? And that's not a 3-minute topic. That's a longer topic. So, yeah, it's interesting, by the way. I will say, since I have a few more minutes to talk here, I will say, talking about all this stuff, I still really find a lot of joy in. I've been hearing that the industry is getting really, really hard for people over 40 nowadays. There's a lot of like ageism, if you will, of like getting hired is pretty tough. And so let's say hypothetically, if, this is never going to happen, but let's say it did. If Riot fired me and whatever, it's like finding a new job would be tough. I don't know. Finding ways to just like do these talks and pass on this knowledge and stuff like that. I don't know. It's why I find streaming so captivating. It's like being a source of information out there. The internet's, sorry, I'm getting way off track. I'm going down rabbit holes of like how we share information as humans in the modern era and how we seek that out. It's like we're in a part in the world right now where you can get any information you want. We should be the most educated versions of ourselves. And yet somehow, most of the time, we just ignore all that information and just ask stupid questions anyway. So, I don't know. But I always go back to what Joe Tung said, which is arm your advocates, right? Because usually what I've seen happen that is good is people who watch my streams or watch these podcasts or whatever, they hear a thing and then they know the answer, and then someone else asks the question and that answer gets passed on and knowledge gets shared. I think that's a good thing. And I think as long as I'm doing this, arm your advocates is going to continue to be my stance. It's just for these next 3 months, I won't be able to do that. So we'll see. We'll see. Yeah. All right. Anyway, that's about the 30-minute mark. Sorry I didn't get to the last question. Like I said, I think I'm now at 3 questions, by the way, in my backlog that require me to research. I might just like one of these mornings not do walk the dog while I'm walking and instead do it from my computer so I can just pull up examples and you get like an actual full video. Because again, the questions that are like, what are your 3 favorite traits of all time? It's like, I want to give you a good answer, not a just top of my head answer. But yeah, there's like now 3 questions in my backlog that require this kind of research to get right, to give you good answers. Because again, I can just do the top of my head, but as I've shown you guys in the past, I'm typically pretty bad about remembering every little set and every little detail, and it'd be like, oh right, set 5 had draconic. That trait was horrible, like it's like that's why I liked when we do the tier list with me, Giovanni, and Witty. It's like we go back through every unit and we're like, oh right, that 2-cost Skarner existed. It was awful, I forgot about that. It's nice to get that refresher. So, all right. Anyway, I'm gonna end it here. Hopefully, you guys have a good Wednesday. I got no plans today. I gotta figure out something. I gotta decide if I want to just be incredibly lazy and play games and watch movies, or productive and like find a project to do or something. So, okay, that's gonna do it for me. Until next time, take it easy.